So you know it's not a crime to be fascinated by all things criminal. And if you do like delving into the underworld, why not join us for a special live show on March 27th at the Cork Opera House? We'll be talking about the making of a cartel and all the wild and crazy stories that happened along the way. So why not join us for this special live show? Tickets from corkpodcastfestival.ie.
Are you still in touch with Madison Smyth?
I message her every time I'm going to write a story about her, and she just sends me back mad abuse.
Like what?
Well, she told me, first of all, it was like, keep me and my Johnny's name out of your mouth. And I was like, I just give it. And then she denied that she was involved in any crash. And I said, you were given a right to reply, and you chose instead to tell a blatant lie. Madison, you know, if you'd have just went, like, say she just went, oh, there's a crash and it was terrible, I'm really sorry. It wasn't my fault, it was just an accident. Accidents happen. But instead, she was all like, there wasn't no crash. My BMW is fine. It's an underground car park. Do you want to see a video of it? No, and I'm like, no, I don't want to see a video of your car.
So Madison Smyth is somebody who's been on your radar really since probably the last 13 months, December of last year, when John George went missing, first of all, in Spain. Let's recap it for those who don't remember the story.
You know, Nicola, I look back to a time in my life when I didn't know who these people were, and it was a simpler life, I have to say. It was a simpler life. Yes, in December 2024, I was sent to Spain because John George, a guy from West Belfast, was missing. His family had launched a really high-profile campaign to look for him. It was decided that I would go over and report and see what was going on. And the day that I arrived at the house where Johnny Smyth and Madison Allen had been staying. They weren't married at this particular time. Johnny Smyth had been living in Spain for quite some time. John George was, I'm going to say, a friend, associate of him anyway. He went on holiday a few days before and had been with Johnny Smyth. That had a fallout. He was in Stem or someone else, but they had been living in this villa, this apartment in this street, a very residential street. And
this is all in Alicante, of course.
Yeah, just outside of Alicante. Very residential street, but very upmarket, higher end. It had, I always remember there was a Harley Davidson parked outside. There was a jet ski sitting in the inside it. There was a swimming pool, and there was two young guys who looked completely off their heads on drugs. And despite the fact they lived in Spain with the colour of cold porridge, they were dreadful looking. And Madison and Johnny Smyth were nowhere to be seen. They had legged it and went on the run.
And she was at that point 19 years of age.
She was. And because I like to try and see the best in people, I naively thought that she was a poor little victim of coercive control and this poor teenage girl and caught up in the middle of all this. I have reassessed my opinion of Madison since then. So they went on the run, and while I was there, the day I arrived, actually, the Garda Civil upgraded it from a missing person to a criminal investigation, and quite soon after that confirmed it was a murder investigation. We now know that John George was actually killed on the 14th of December. He was stabbed, he was shot, he was beaten up, he was stripped naked, and his body dumped in a very rural area. And it was a lemon orchard, and his body was found there a couple of weeks later, we believe, with the assistance of one of the people who was involved in that. There has been no one charged. Spanish law is different from what you're used to dealing with in the south and what I'm used to dealing with here in Northern Ireland, in that the investigations are judge-led, so the police do the investigation. They have now said detectives have completed their investigation, and it's now with the judge, and then the judge will bring people forward every now and then and ask them questions and continue on. And then shortly before, not necessarily on the day of the trial, but shortly before the trial starts, then the judge will charge the people. But by that point, their defence will have all their disclosure and everything all ready to go. And then the trial will start. So whereas here you'd be arrested, you'd be charged sometimes when the investigation is only in its infancy. The police would then continue on the investigation, send a full file to the PPS. It's sort of flipped on its head in Spain, so it doesn't work that way. So while the Garda Civil have said they're not seeking anyone else in relation to the murder investigation other than Johnny Smyth and a guy called Michael Malley, who is from the Czech Republic, and he was knocking around with him in Spain as well. So they're the only two suspects.
So they're essentially before the courts, before the magistrate, under suspicion, but they haven't been charged.
No, they're not even. It's not even before the magistrate. The judge that's there before will probably be their trial judge. It's a completely different sort of system, court system. But they're the only suspects. They are at this stage, and you can't say for definite, but likely to be charged in relation to the John George murder shortly before a trial will start. The family now have a solicitor in Spain, and that solicitor is telling them probably maybe the late autumn of this year, you would get a trial and the trial will start. In the meantime, Johnny Smyth went on the run. There was an international and a European arrest warrant issued from him. We understand now that, first of all, he legged it to Thailand. Madison didn't go with him because Madison had no passport. I'm told I had an argument and he had ripped up her passport prior to this, all before any of this happened. She had to then get a new passport. He didn't spend very long in Thailand. He then came back again and they moved around a bit. They got married in Gibraltar while on the run.
Did she
And
post the wedding photographs?
she
on
didn't
her
for
social
quite some
media?
time, and then at one stage she did post a picture of her ring and something else, and then it was obvious that they had got married while on the run. Look, there's questions about that too, because if you have an arrest warrant out and it's a European arrest warrant, and the UK authorities and the European authorities and the international arrest warrant, because they did know that he had went through Thailand at one point, you'd imagine the legal paperwork in Gibraltar would have picked it up, but clearly it didn't. There's also questions about who was the witnesses to that, because there's obviously people who had to be involved in helping them on the run because they were.
So do you mean we're relying on their word that they're married?
They are married.
They
It
are
was checked
married.
that they are married. So, and then they went back to Portugal, and they were staying in quite a sort of remote, not a particularly touristy part of Portugal, but a nice part of Portugal. And they were in an Airbnb, which they had long term rented. I remember going on to the Airbnb. It was privately owned, and it had been rented right up until the end of the year. So clearly they had intended to stay there for quite some time. And Billy George, the father of John George, who's been very active in trying to seek justice for his son, he, through other sources, tracked them down, bizarrely, to Portugal, went to Portugal, sat outside the apartment, seen them coming in and out, and in an uncharacteristically restrained motive for Billy, George went to the Portuguese police, who immediately enacted the arrest warrant, arrested him and had him extradited across the border to Spain. And he was then moved he was questioned by the judge, and he was remanded for quite some considerable time. He had been refused bail on a number of occasions. And then in December, just coming up to the anniversary of John George's death, he was released on 100,000 euro bond, and in Spain you have to actually lodge that money.
That money. Where does that
Sometimes
come from?
when people are bailed here, what you can do is you can give a surety, but you just write that you will honour this if they disappear, and they can take it from your property or something like that. Whereas in Spain you have to actually physically lodge the money. So 100,000 euro was lodged with the court. He was let out on bail, and you and I would imagine, if you were involved in something that was so high profile and reported on, and you were let out on 100,000 euro bail, you'd want to be keeping your head down, wouldn't you, and keeping out of the headlines.
You'd try.
Yeah. No. No such thing. No such thing at all. They are addicted to social media. This couple, they were genuinely addicted to social media. They don't seem to be able to stay off it. They film each other having arguments with each other, and they end up posted online, sent around in WhatsApp messages. They're constantly filming each other, making daft videos as if they're some kind of influencers. He's clearly wiped out in half them. He can hardly string a sentence together. He's constantly waving a Rolex in front of it as if we're all meant to be impressed with that. At one stage, he posted a video of him with busted knuckles, saying he'd beat up 3 men. This was while he's on bail, within days of being on bail. It's all very bizarre to me. I know, and I have worked with a lot of criminals, gangsters, covered a lot of cases over the years, and this is just not how they behave. They keep their heads down, like they try and stay in the spotlight.
For sure. And are they enjoying? Do they like the publicity
I
back
think
home?
that
here?
I get the impression she genuinely does, but then is this a generational thing? Is this someone who was, born in an era of social media with a phone in her hand? And Madison Allen, now Madison Smyth, is an OnlyFans creator. She does content online, pornography basically. And so therefore social media is a big part of her persona. So she as well.
And this has all sort of become part of her story.
Yeah, it really has. So while her husband was on remand before he got into bail, Madison herself wasn't exactly keeping her head down or, being the sort of dutiful wife. She was stopped in September last year in her then Audi car with another girl, a British national, and the car had around a kilo of crystal meth in the car. She was arrested and questioned. There was other drugs in the car as well. She was arrested and questioned in relation to that. She was held for 10 days. And then she was released on €20,000 bail. And once she was released, then in December and in and around the time, the George family went to Spain, quite a large crowd of them, to mark John George's anniversary. They were going to the spot where his body was found to lay flowers. And at that time, on the same night, I think the night after they arrived, Madison Allen is stopped again in a car that she was driving with 3 other people. One was an Irish guy, one was a guy from England, I think he was from Manchester, and the other person got out and legged it and ran and has never been traced or caught. And there was 2 loaded weapons found in the car. So she and the 2 other guys were released again on bail pending further investigations. They just blamed it the guy who ran away,
Right.
claiming they didn't know there was guns in the car. He had them and then he bolted. So they were released again. So there's another investigation going on into that. So here we have this couple. One's been investigated for a murder. The other's been investigated. At this point now, we have drugs and weapons possession. And then we move on to quite recently. And Madison's driving a BMW car, which is involved in a fatal collision with a Hyundai. And the Hyundai car was hit from behind and went flying into the central reservation. 1 man died and the 3 passengers were injured, albeit none of the 3 had life-threatening injuries. These are all British nationals. It is now my understanding that the man who died, I think the Spanish authorities originally reported he was 54, not wearing a seatbelt. I now understand from my own contacts and sources he was actually a 66-year-old retired man. I think he was from the north of England. He was travelling in a car with his wife and another couple, and he was wearing a seatbelt. It's said that there's pictures of, if you've ever been in a car crash, you'll know you get a big bruise from where the seatbelt is. And so there's another investigation into that, albeit that is a charge of, I think it's sort of like what we would call death by dangerous driving. I think it's then it's called, manslaughter by careless driving or something like that. So she's now again under separate investigation for that
investigation.
as well. So she's under 3 different investigations and he's under 1.
Was he in the car with her when this?
He was in the car, he was with her, and he was a passenger in the car. There are rumours that police received a number of reports prior to this from members of the public who were concerned about the driving of the BMW. She was brought back again in front of the judge and warned about her social media content because within hours, less than a day of this fatal collision, she was posting her menu for her, I think it's what they call spicy content.
Right.
Quite an extensive menu, and she has a range of things that she will do from €10 to €700, depending on what you're into. And this isn't the kind of thing that you imagine would be high up on your agenda if you'd just been involved in a fatal collision.
So she's getting this kind of publicity because she's, been investigated for a number of crimes, and because her partner is been investigated for the murder, or is the chief suspect in the murder of John George, and is sort of using the publicity then to
promote
advertise her OnlyFans stuff.
and content.
And what sort of money is
I have absolutely no
in
idea.
that? Why
I
not?
mean, I think there is all sorts of rumours. I mean, you have the sort of, famous sort of Bonnie Blue type people
Yeah,
who claim they're
talking
making millions of
about-
pounds a week, and all sorts of money. And then I think it's a race to the bottom. OnlyFans, you have to get more and more extreme to make money on it now because it's a crowded market.
And what's
I
this
don't know
girl's
whether
background? I mean,
She's
how
from-
did
from
she
Newton
go
Ab-
out there, and how did she meet up with him?
She's from Newton Abbey. She is from Newton Abbey, in the outskirts of Belfast. She met him because there is a former relationship, and I can't remember the way of it, but basically she knows him through another relative. So basically what I'm trying to get at is he knows her from she's a child. He knew her from she was quite young. Now, albeit there's an age difference, not a huge age difference between them, but there is an age difference. And she's been going with him from she was quite young. But some people would say, is she? Now, she appears to be the driving force behind a lot of what's happening. If you watch the videos,
Right.
even if she's not in them, you can hear her prompting him what to say from
On the
behind
social media.
the camera. Yeah.
How often is she in contact with you?
Well, if I write about her, you contact her and give her a right to reply. But she doesn't. She's not much interested in me offering a right to reply. And after the car accident, I contacted her and she said she wasn't involved in a car accident. It was all made up. It was all lies. And her BMW, did she sent me a video of it? It was in an underground car park and it was perfectly fine. And it's like, right, well, we carried the story because there was a car crash. There was a man died. He was buried last week, and said that she didn't wish to contact her. That's it. She says I was to keep her and Johnny's name out of my mouth. And then she contacted me again last week. She sends a bunch of, sometimes it's I can't comprehend. It's just garbled. So I struggled to make head or tail of it. And she was more interested in me saying she was banned from social media. She's now, I think, accepted the fact that we all know that. And she said that I should stop selling stories for her. And, I had to explain, I'm not selling stories about anyone. You and I have a job.
Yes.
And we are paid. I am paid the same money at the end of every month, whether Madison Allen kills someone or not. And that's the truth, And so it doesn't matter to me whether she's involved in fatal crashes or not. There's plenty of other things I could be reporting on. So I'm not selling stories on her. I'm doing my job and reporting on her, as are many members of the local Spanish media who have now dubbed this couple. I think it probably loses something in translation, but they call them the homicidal marriage. That is the name for them in the Spanish press. That's how they refer to them when they're reporting on them. So they're infamous in that part of Spain. And I don't think that that's going to last much longer because, we're coming now up into the tourist time. A lot of this was going on in the winter months and there's not a lot happening. The place is going to be flooded with tourists soon. And I don't think the Spanish authorities are going to take kindly, to people who don't seem to be able to spend a month without being investigated for something or another. So,
and very difficult for John George's family, in fairness. Here's the suspect in their loved one's murder.
Difficult too for the other family as well, who I have spoke to. They're not ready to go public yet, but I have conversations with members of that family.
Which family are you talking about?
The family of the English guy,
of course.
yeah, who have said, what we can't understand is why these people were driving around. Had there been proper restrictions on them, had the Spanish authorities dealt with them properly, our relative would still be alive. This was a 66-year-old retired gentleman who was, I think if you're 66, you're probably only a year retired, who was now going to enjoy the rest of his life, and that has been taken from him, albeit it's still under investigation, and we'll see what happens. But I mean, had it been an accident that was of no fault to anyone, and accidents do happen in cars, we know, someone went into the back of me a few years ago and there was no malice or anything in there. The woman just had a momentary lapse of concentration. That happens. And that's all they had to say, and say, it was an accident, they didn't mean it, we're leaving the place, and, our sympathies to the man who lost his life. Instead, they just lie and lie. It didn't happen. It's all lying about us. Okay, it did happen, but why are you saying we're not allowed on social media? Okay, it did happen, but stop talking. You mean they changed their story
There's
constantly.
times you feel that the Spanish system, it's kind of sometimes obvious why people are drawn to live in Spain, because of the way the system works. They seem to be able to get...
I mean, I have a theory on what is going on with the pair of them because I don't understand the sort of gloves-off approach to them with the Spanish authorities, albeit she's clearly under surveillance. She gets stopped in her car all the time. I have been travelling in and out of Spain for 25, 30 years. I've never been hire cars every time. I've never been stopped in a car once the whole time I've been there. And Madison doesn't seem to be able to go from A to B without getting stopped by police. So clearly they're under the radar of the Spanish police. She seems, while he is in prison, to have got herself caught up with some actual gangsters. I mean, Johnny Smyth may act like a gangster, but I mean, he's, cardboard cutout gangster compared to some of the people I've seen over the years. She seems to have got herself involved with some quite serious gangsters during there, and you wonder, are Spanish police constantly releasing her in an attempt that she will lure them to someone else who they are seeking in terms of something else, which can happen.
I'm sure they would absolutely refute that.
I mean, you would wonder, are they watching her to get her for much more serious criminality?
I think their system is just so slow, to be honest with you. And you often see, especially with organised crime stuff, there'll be a big blast of publicity when they go in on raids and they arrest people. They bring them before the courts. And then as the years go on, happened with the Kinahans, but it's happened with many others.
Yeah.
The charges fall away.
They'd rather they just left, I think, in terms of that. I mean, the amount of money that it's causing to the Spanish state to keep these people in prison and try them, I think in a lot of cases, they'd rather they just move their criminality elsewhere, and that's it. And a lot of the people who, you know, at one stage had the reputation of being the Costa del Crime and all of that, and a lot of those people just, they keep their heads down and they don't come to the attention of the police. The police know they're there. And they probably know to a degree that maybe they're not making an honest living and they have sums of unexplained wealth. But they're also not causing havoc and mayhem, nor are they posting every detail of their life on social media for the whole world to see and ask questions as to why the authorities aren't dealing with them properly. And so when you have the local Spanish media now knowing you on a first name basis, that is not good. You know, it's not good.
What about John George's family? Have they continued with their campaign in order to try and move this investigation to the next level, which will be a trial? If
Yeah, I mean,
charged?
for them, they are now they're not participants in the trial. They will be witnesses at one stage. They do in Spain, you are allowed to have a solicitor to represent you. That would be different from here, because here all you would be is a witness for the prosecution. Whereas in Spain, you are allowed to hire a solicitor to represent you during the court proceedings, and that's how they're able to keep up to date every time they're called before the judge and with what is happening. And in terms of the bail and everything, that they were informed of what was happening. So they do have representation there. But for them, it's like anybody else who's a victim of crime or whose loved one was a victim of crime. It's just a waiting game. You have to wait on the system there. And as you said, it's slow, it's cumbersome. It's very different from what we have here. There's some things that you look at and you can't explain why it's happening, but then maybe it's just how things work in that country. And then what happens is, as you said, it takes a long time. But with anyone who ever does get convicted, they get serious time as well. You know, they hand out hefty sentences when they do convict you. So sometimes it might take a while. There are some people they prefer might just take themselves off somewhere else. But they do make an example of people, because the fact is Spain relies so heavily on tourism from around the world, but mainly from other parts of Europe. And so they have to constantly show that this is a safe place to visit. And it is generally a safe place to visit in the main. And that's why I think that, you know, it's not this current spate of constantly posting their lives on social media is just not going to end well for them. You know, had they just got their bail and kept their heads down, it might have went better.
And finally, do you have any idea where the bail money came from, given that it actually has to be lodged?
The bail money, I have been told where it came from, but those people have no involvement in any kind of criminality, so I wouldn't want to get into that. But
because a lot of money,
it's a ton of money. Yeah. I mean, her less so than him, but yeah, that's quite a bit of money, and it's quite a bit of money to lose if they do go on the run. The thing is, they're limited into where they can go because they clearly need to make money, and for her to make money, she has to use OnlyFans, and for her to use OnlyFans, she's immediately traceable anywhere in the world that she is, just through the fact that she, you know, you have IP addresses. It'll later authorities straight back to her. So maybe they're better waiting it out, but it's very, you know, I've been doing this, 25 years. I've never came across anyone quite like them. There's a sort of morbid fascination with them by the people who, you know, the readers and of the paper as well, because it's just such a bizarre way to behave.
They don't care.
It's such a bizarre way to behave. And they don't care. And there's like, you keep on thinking, there's serious consequences to your actions. Because they're not now, because you're not saying them now, it doesn't mean that they're not going to happen.
It's like
eventually.
They're living for the day, literally every day.
Yeah, it is. It is. And Madison, I think one of the things, she made a video saying, called me an old lady. And I'm like, but yes, I am an old lady. And the thing about it is, compared to you, I'm ancient. But despite the fact that I am like probably nearly 2.5 times her age, like Paddy Power would give me better odds in living the next 10 years than her, the way she's living at the minute. Do you know what I mean? I mean, she really needs to calm it down. And one day she'll think if she gets to my age, it'll be a luxury, given the lifestyle she's living.
For sure. She could do it, taking your advice. Allison Morris, thank you very much. If you're a crimeworld.com subscriber, you've probably already binged on our latest exclusive podcast series, The Regency 10 Years On, from the hit that changed gangland forever. This 6-part anniversary special revisits that fateful day when David Byrne was shot dead at the Northside Hotel, igniting a bloody feud between the Kinahan and Hutch gangs, one of the deadliest rivalries in Irish history. Here's a taste of the new series, exclusive to crimeworld.com subscribers. So that Friday was one of those really quiet days. I mean, we all knew that Daniel Kinahan was in Dublin for the Clash of the Clans boxing weigh-in. At least we knew he was due into Dublin the next day. That Clash of the Clans bout match had been heavily advertised. But the day itself there was just little going on.
So there was very little happening that day. It's February. It's kind of a quiet enough time for news in general. And Alan Cherry and Ernie Leslie were on the road. They were at another story actually in Finglas.
What was that, do you remember?
Well, it was one of these classic sort of district court stories where a guy I think some teenagers had thrown stones at his car and he got out and slapped the teenager. Always great kind of human stories because some people feel sorry for the teenagers and some people don't. And so Alan had been out there. But the guy had moved on. He called out to his house to see if he wanted to talk. He'd moved on. He wasn't there. And we discussed going to the Regency earlier. And I said, look, just go along and see what happens. Divert there. We obviously weren't expecting anything. And obviously that point of Alan being there would be the subject of conspiracy, but we'll get into that at a later point.
For sure. So it was a case really that day of, one thing hadn't worked out, so go to the next. But also there was definitely a general sense of if we could be there, just in case.
Yes, and as you said, to see who was standing beside the Kinahans and who wasn't from that bigger organised crime group. So Alan and Ernie went out. I got a call. I think you got a call almost simultaneously, but I got a call from Alan. I'd spoken to him earlier on the day saying, see what happens. And he phoned me up and said, there's after being a shooting and I think we've got a picture. And I actually went, yeah, very funny. But of course, he stopped me and said, no, I'm serious. There's some guys come out with a gun, there's shots fired, and there's total and utter chaos. And, our first thought is, get yourself safe. I have to admit, my second thought was, I hope they did get good pictures. But, you're still thinking they have to get safe. I mean, I know you probably got a similar call because Ernie and Alan obviously were in the same Jeep.
And of course, Ernie's the guy taking the photographs,
yes.
So he's on the phone to me. So I actually had gone for a pizza for lunch and I had come back over to the office and the phone rings and it was Ernie. And I answered and he was panicked on the other end of the phone. This was real high octane stuff. And he's still trying to take photos. He's trying to tell me what's happened. He's told me he thinks he's got a good one of one of the shooters as they were running from the scene. He was trying to call up the photograph on the back of his camera.
Yeah.
Because it would have taken him a while to get it onto a screen, but he'd also sent it into the office.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So he was kind of in the middle of doing a number of things. And as I was on the phone to him from memory, the photograph came into the office and we put it up on the big screen. And it was clear to see that this wasn't just one of the shooters as he suspected, but it was two. One of them was dressed as a woman.
Which is, of course, there was also this confusing story about guards coming in with weapons, and obviously we know now that they weren't ERU guys, they were guys dressed as them. But Alan was telling me this, there was talk of these guards, and then obviously there was, the crowd fleeing from the scene. So it was all confusing. But as you said, Ernie had taken a picture of the back of his camera. People will know what the photographer's cameras look like, and they have a little digital screen. You don't see it in great detail, but we knew this is a once-in-a-lifetime photograph has been gotten.
Yeah, as soon as it came in. And of course, look, the newsrooms aren't as busy as they used to be. They used to be very busy, buzzy places with phones ringing everywhere. And it felt like a proper newsroom that day. I remember everybody's phone was going. People were hearing little bits about it. The news was starting to break about it. And of course, we were there sitting in the office with this photo. There's that sort of news sense in you that you want to run this.
Yeah.
And at the time, we weren't putting stuff up online. This would have been held for the paper on the Sunday, and this is a Friday afternoon. We had something really special here. But we also, I think, knew the guards were going to be desperate for that picture because they were two gunmen running from a scene of a crime. So it was a very compromised situation, and there was a bit of arguments going on, and there was voices were raised.
Totally. I mean, because it is complex. I mean, normally the journalism likes to keep itself separate from the Gardaí investigations. So Garda investigations go on and journalism reports on them. But obviously then you're put in this compromising position because you have guys running out visibly with handguns in their hands. And, they're obviously then disappeared into the ether. And you have to have a discussion about what is your civic responsibility in terms of, do you help the guards? You don't want these armed gunmen to run down the street and kill another few people. So it was a complex one, and people were aware straight away that the guards are going to want these pictures and want to use it for their purposes. And we also have our purposes, which is to tell what happened and to report on the news. So there was a conflict straight away.
From my memory, as the afternoon went on and I was talking to contacts and to other people who were involved in crime journalism, etc., it became apparent that there were no guards at the weigh-in. That in actual fact, the guards didn't seem to be there at all. They were called literally by the hotel and had arrived in response to what had already gone on. Of course, David Byrne had been shot dead in the reception of the hotel. We were getting photographs in later in the day, which showed a very shocked-looking Liam Byrne standing outside the hotel, his hands in his pockets, standing beside his cousin Liam Rowe, another significant cartel member. There was no sign of Daniel Kinahan. I was getting calls from people who were telling me that these professional killers had been flown into the country and had already been flown out. There was rumours, there was spin, and also there was the general, I suppose, conversations in regards to, oh my God, what is going to happen next? I mean, all anyone knew for sure was something was going to happen. David Byrne was a very, very senior lieutenant. He was also from criminal royalty from the Byrne family. His brother-in-law is Thomas Bomber Kavanagh. His brother is Liam Byrne, and he's very much at the heart of the Kinahan cartel. We knew from the beginning that this attack had occurred as part of the rivalry between the Kinahan and Hutch factions of what was once the one organisation. And I think everybody was really trying to predict what this might lead to, but nobody could have guessed.
Nobody could have guessed. And of course, those rumours straight away went around. It was straight away focused on the Hutch gang. But at this time, if you remember, while there had been other incidents, for example, an attempted hit on Jerry Hutch in Lanzarote, those incidents weren't always public. People were straight away thinking this isn't the type of normal organised crime operation. They were looking at the weapons, saying, is there a paramilitary organisation involved here? Nobody knew fully. And of course, what people did fear straight away was, no matter what, people knew how big and how powerful the Kinahans had become, and the likelihood of them not striking back was inevitable. That blood was going to flow.
That bit absolutely 100%. But at that very early stage, I recall contacts of mine suggesting that the Hutches were an army. Did they have the backing of the dissidents? Was this going to, were they going to be very heavily armed because of that? They had contacts in the north. It was like as if people were trying to size up how two Premiership teams were going to play against one another. That's what it felt like. You've been listening to an extract from The Regency, 10 years on from the hit that changed gangland forever. Visit crimeworld.com and subscribe to hear the full series now. And you'll also get exclusive access to our other podcast deep dives on the Dapper Don, Christy Kinahan, Thomas Bomber Kavanagh, and more.